mutinies became so much a feature of these voyages that some captains sought insurance against loss caused by them. And on some slave ships, the decks were heightened to make it difficult for slaves to jump overboard. The struggle against enslavement continued right into the New World, into the Americas, the Caribbean. And it took many forms. And before I go any further, I want to tell you, let us remove from our thinking the common belief by lots of those other historians about the abolitionists. I have never heard a bigger fairy tale or a more than a tissue of lies being told about the abolitionists freeing the slaves. Anyone who believes that believes that he has 10 heads. There is not a word of truth in that. Men do not liberate people that they have enslaved. By the time the enslavement, the liberation came, our African brothers and sisters had already freed themselves. It was that attitude and that state of being that caused a brother, an enslaved brother in Martinique, on the island of Martinique, to say he does not know what they're all jumping about and ringing church bells and dancing about the place and having church services for something that we had already taken. The reason that the abolitionists came and caused the removal of laws that they had put there was because they were getting a lot of problems and they were getting a lot of flack from the British women in England who at that time were campaigning for their freedom because they had no kind of legal rights at the time. And it was then they began to join forces with the whole business of slavery. And it was the fact of the women en masse that began to campaign at that time that the British people and the others caused emancipation. Otherwise, it would never have happened. But it did happen because our brothers and our sisters had taken upon themselves to free themselves. In fact, the whole system of slavery had broken down by the time they came around to their abolition. In fact, one of the very known things in the history of this question and this business of slavery and the slave trade is a question of what they called in the history books absentee owners. These were men who were forced to leave their plantations and fly back, well, they couldn't fly back, and boat back to England and to France and to elsewhere because it was too hot for them on the plantations of the Caribbean and the Americas. And please do not think for one moment that the African brothers and sisters in these United States did not do their share. Long before the American Revolution, already petitions had been put up by African American brothers for their freedom in the different legislatures, Massachusetts, etc. They had already done that. And what is more, we are only told with any kind of detail about the rebellions of Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, and Nat Turner. But by the time these came about, there had been already 250 recorded instances of rebellions in North America. They are all listed, the dates, the estates, the plantations, all of them are listed. I have a copy of that in my office. All of them are listed, every one of them. But they tell you about 3 to make it look as though that the brothers here and the sisters here in America didn't. They fought all the time, everywhere. In these notes that I have here, the writer, an African Caribbean scholar, he says, like a chain of Andean volcanoes, black resistance erupted in blood and flame from the south of Brazil through the Caribbean to the United States. The first eruption took place in Hispaniola in 1522, the last in Jamaica in 1865, a time span of almost 3.5 centuries. All that time they were fighting to remove that condition. And I will tell you, the British, the French, and the others used all their arms. The Portuguese, the Dutch, they used soldiers. They fought bitterly to remove that. I'll go into those details a little later. And between 1522 and 1600, there were slave risings in Hispaniola, Mexico, Peru, and Central America. During the 17th century, there were insurrections in Jamaica, Barbados, Haiti, and Brazil. In the period from 1700 in St. Vincent, Suriname, Guyana, St. Lucia, Jamaica, Dominica. Every single island, every single area that you want to mention, there was uprising, there were uprisings. And that was what caused the whole system to break. It wasn't the fact that the price of sugar had gone down in the world market, because by 1870, Cuba was producing the bulk of the sugar at the time. Already in Haiti, the sugar plantations had been razed to the ground. And the other, Jamaica and these other islands, they couldn't produce because people like Kojo and Nani had made it impossible for them to keep plantations. What was happening, in fact, when they tell you the price of sugar, the price fluctuated up and down. If that was true, why, when they were forced to issue a proclamation about emancipation, why did they try to get Chinese and East Indians from India to come as indentured servants to work, where the African brothers and sisters refused to work? They refused. Why? Our common sense tells us we know why. But these people think that we don't think. And that's the big mistake that they have made from time immemorial, and they're still making. And that mistake is going to be their tragedy. It was not only, we focus on Haiti, it's true, and we'll talk about Haiti tonight, but there was an organized movement up and down. In fact, one of the good things about Toussaint Louverture, apart from the fact that he was a tremendous general, one of the things he had vision. Although when he spoke of peace, he was thinking of peace including those French barbarians